Hey everybody, Riot Mort here, back with Riot Kent, and we are here with an update to patch 11.5. Something about our patch development is the way it actually works is typically we lock them down like a week before the patch launches, and with our schedule it can be really tight. But thankfully we have a feature we call micro patching where we can do a couple more changes last minute. It is taxing on the team, but with all the regional qualifiers coming up, we really wanted to make sure we got this patch right. So we really took a close look at some of our updated data and some of our opinions. And Kent, what did the team decide with that information?
Um, yeah, so we decided to add in actually quite a few more changes into this patch, although they're relatively small. We wanted to bring more diversity, even more diversity to some comps who are underperforming and just kind of tone down some units that were overperforming. So like small nudges in both directions to open up more options.
Yeah, I think there's a few changes in here that'll surprise some people, a few that won't surprise some people, and a few missing I think will also surprise some people. So we're going to go through this relatively quick. If it's already was in the patch, we're not going to talk about it much. You can check the last video for that. If it's new, we'll explain why, and then we might also talk about some of the things that are missing. So let's just jump into it. All right. So system changes on the debuff side. Nothing new to add here. Nothing changed. Again, this doesn't really affect the game right now. It'll affect it long term. If you want to see more info, go check out the other video. But really not much to talk about here. So cool. All right. First big change. I think a lot of people are going to be happy to see this, but maybe not completely. The level 7 chosen odds for a 4 cost are being dropped from 5% to 2%. And that 3% is going back into 3 cost. So I think the eternal debate here will be why not remove it. But Kent, why do you explain this change?
Yeah, so with the buffed chosens from to 50%, so we're just seeing a lot more people hit 4 cost chosens every lobby, and also with kind of the meta shifting to everybody, or not everybody, but a lot of players rolling down at level 7, it just becomes very prevalent. So it's no longer like the high roll, oh crap, somebody hit a 4 cost chosen. It's now, well, there's another one. And so we wanted to bring it back down to the levels it was at before, where it was a lot rarer. And so the correct number was to move it to 2%.
Yeah. This is a 60% drop, so we should definitely be seeing a lot of them. And I'll be the one to say that, again, our stance hasn't really changed here. We still want these high roll moments available, so we're not removing it, but this should put it, honestly, even harder than it was in 11.3. Because, again, 60% drop here is pretty big. But if it happens and you're level 7 and you see a Adept Shen in your shop, you might make an interesting decision. So still pretty happy with that. I guess the other question here, Kent, is why not do the same thing to level 5?
Yeah. So me and Static talked about this one a lot. In theory, it kind of makes sense because the two levels have similar odds or the same odds. But players often roll down at level 7. There's like 40 gold, 30 gold, however much you want to roll down, but nobody's really rolling down at level 5. And so that high roll moment is still there because you either natural it or you don't. Nobody's really committing that much to rolling, especially not 3/4 of the lobby. And so it made sense we thought it made sense to just keep it the way it is currently.
Yeah. I think the big thing that convinced me is just that you don't see that many people roll that much gold at level 5. Usually they're retaining it for level 6. So pretty happy with that. So again, this won't please everybody, but it should be a better direction for the competitive meta especially. So cool. All right, trait changes. There were none before. Now we have Keeper. I don't think this one surprises any with the prevalence of how much it's been rising. But Keeper 6 gets nerfed from 275 to 250.
Yeah, it's nice to see like this new comp come up, and Kenan's one of the primary carries. It's a lot of fun to watch. But it was overperforming in the late mid game stages, and so we just toned it down just a little bit. Like a 10% shield nerf.
Yep. Again, we still want this comp to be a good playable comp. It's exciting to see Keepers playable. But yeah, looking at the data, it was overperforming just a tiny bit in that mid game. So
yeah, definitely don't want to kill a comp. Just want to bring it back down from possibly OP levels to a balanced, healthy state.
Yeah. All right, this is the one. It doesn't surprise me that much because I play this comp a lot, but I think this is going to surprise a lot of people. a Vanguard 8 armor nerf, and a Vanguard every level magic resist nerf. Why make this change?
Yeah. So it's going to surprise people, but 8 Vanguard is performing really, really well. You don't see it very often, but when it does well, I mean, when there are lobbies with it, it's killing the lobbies. And so this armor nerf is to kind of bring it slightly more bring down its win rate slightly. As far as the magic resist, this is more targeted towards Vanguards in general as the frontline. They're like the premier frontline. Everyone is running, lots of Aatrox, Sejuani, Ornns like in their front lines. And the answer to that has been Last Whisper. But there should be the reason for that is like they have so much free magic resist that it's kind of hard to burst them down. And so we want to reduce the magic resist here to open up other options. You don't have to build Last Whisper. Maybe if you have a high AP damage carry, you can also take down these Vanguards. And so this is kind of to prevent them from overshadowing all the other frontliners that exist.
Yeah, I think we'll see slightly different front lines just a little bit. I mean, I think Sejuani and Aatrox are still going to be very good, but maybe not quite as must. And hopefully that just means you don't have to build Last Whisper anymore. So,
yeah.
Cool. All right, 1 cost. Again, before there were 0, now there are 4. And from what I understand here, the general message of all of these is we looked at the 1 cost, especially the 3-star, but also just in general. And there were 4 that were underperforming by a significant margin. For example, Wukong 3 was actually the highest performer, but these 4 were on the bottom by kind of a big gap, and so we're bringing them back up. Does that sound about right?
Yep, that's about right.
Looking at these numbers, Diana seems pretty safe. Nasus is a big buff. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, so with Nasus and Yasuo, they're like relatively safe buffs. Specifically for Nasus is at 3 stars. He's still pretty good as like a transition unit, and in the data, him as a 2-star is doing decently in the mid game. But we want that payoff to be worth it. When you commit, 3 items to him, and you have him at 3-star, he should be killing things before he falls off inevitably later in the game. And so we wanted to bump that up.
And then the Nidalee change, I think, is another one that's kind of surprising. Having her cast even more. What's the thoughts here?
Yeah, this one's kind of spicy. So basically with 4 Sharpshooter and Shojin, she'll be casting every 2 autos, which sounds insane. It's like she'll be casting a lot. But there's the most recent change for making her do very little damage at close range and a lot of damage at long range, gives her kind of a fail case. And so if you want to kill the Nidalee, who is a really strong carry now, you can just jump in her face. So if you put a Talon in front of her, it's going to do very little damage to the Talon, and the bounces will do very little damage because the initial damage was also very low. And so having that fail case gave us more feel safe about doing a change kind of this big.
Okay. And so then I think the obvious question looking at these changes is, isn't this just going to bring back reroll meta?
Yeah, these units are all still like somewhat nerfed from what they were before, and so I don't think reroll meta is going to come back. I think it's going to be playable if you have the correct setup. Definitely, like we want these comps to be playable. If you hit 5 Yasuos by really early in the game, you have perfect items for him. You should play that, and you should probably do well. We want that to be possible, but we don't want you to everyone to be playing reroll, and I don't think this will push that back into the meta.
Okay, yeah, I think especially with the Chosen changes also, that it becomes so much easier to transition to a stronger Chosen that we won't see as many people feel like they're forced to play reroll. So something to keep an eye on, though. But yeah, these are all still far nerfed from what they were in 11.3.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, on the 2 costs, no new changes. Still the same Janna change because Kent hates Janna. Still the same Lulu change to try to get Elderwood up a little bit. So nothing new to talk about there. On the 3 cost side, the Vanguard change here is the same. No change there, same purpose. But an Akali buff, which is pretty spicy, and a Sivir 3 nerf, which I don't think will surprise anyone. The Sivir 3 nerf, I think, is she's definitely the highest performing 3 cost 3-star, except maybe Kennen in certain regions. But overall, Sivir's slightly outperforming. But Akali, what's that about?
That Sivir AD is insane. Yeah. But the Akali, so I think there's a perception that Akali's so good, she's a ninja, she gets so much AD, so much AP, but then in our data, she's actually one of the worst performing 3 costs. And it's kind of sad because like early on, you should have, when you have an Akali, you have a ninja, she's like the solo carry unit that you kind of want to put on your team, and she just doesn't do very well. It feels pretty bad. So we're buffing her across all levels. It's a slight nudge, so it's about 10% at all levels. So that you can use her as both as your transition carry, and if you go for like that three star carry, it could be like a good win condition for you, in line with the other 3 costs that are also possible win conditions.
Yeah, it's funny. With Akali not being a great carry in the meta, it actually kind of does bad things. It lets Kale run rampant. It lets Sivir run rampant. So hopefully if Akali can just be nudged up into a playable state, people who hit that early chosen Akali or have an RFC and an IE lying around might actually be able to build some counter options here. So hopefully that does some good things. I know I play this build a lot, so that'll be nice to see.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. 4 costs. Aurelion Sol, no new changes. Morgana, no new changes. Sejuani change. I think this is one that will not surprise anyone, but is interesting coming this late, and poor 6 fortune. But 0.5 second off her stun at 1 and 2, plus 2 seconds on 3-star, but who cares? So what's the thoughts here? And also, why not Aatrox?
Yeah. So went through the data really heavily. Lots of different like KPIs to go through. But basically, Sejuani was played a lot, and she was also taking a lot of firsts, and top fouring a lot too. But like, so across all metrics, she was just overperforming quite significantly more than Aatrox. And so just the impact of her stun is so high, and it kind of can fit into any team. And so we want to reduce her utility here by a little bit. I mean, if you're looking at, watching the tournament or you're playing in your lobbies, you're probably going to see a lot of Sejuanis. And so we want to make sure that it's not, your end game frontline is not just Sejuani plus something.
Makes sense. Okay, 5 cost. No new changes here. Samira's the same, Yone's the same. But you're going to see this on this slide and the next slide. We pulled the burn changes. So all the burns where it was like Sunfire became the 20%, and Morello and Swain became the 30%, we've reset that. So all those items are back to what they were, 25% across all 3. Same state they are on the live right now. What made us do that?
So initially when we did it, we needed to align to certain numbers, because this effect, if there's a 20% and a 30%, it might have different VFX later down in the future. We need to align to a couple numbers, and so we went with 20 and 30%, and we moved the units and the items either to one bucket or the other. But kind of seeing how things have played out, we realized like we don't need to move these, or we don't want to buff or nerf any of these units and items, and so the safest move was to kind of rethink our strategy for that bucketing and move back to like 25%. And this is a safe place that has worked for both Swain and Morello, and Sapphire Cape. So
yeah, I think the combination of Kennen being very strong as well, just in general, not seeing a big shift in these item power, I think is the right call. So again, for competitive, it's just like the last thing we want is every Morello build to dominate and everyone rushing for Tristana Morello in the early game, transition into Kennen. Like, we just don't want to increase the power of any particular build right now because the meta is so diverse. So I'm happy to see this change.
Yeah, we're trying to avoid anything that's kind of a risky change. We're just going with the really safe, heavy outliers, and Morello is definitely not one of them, and so we didn't want to do that.
Yep. On the item side, nothing new to report here. Deathblade same, Shiv same, Trapclaw same, and as I reported, Morello, Nomicon, and Sunfire, just taking those changes out, stay the same as live values. And then finally, bug fixes. Nothing new to report here except the second to last one on the list here, where it says fixed a bug where occasionally dead champions with trait items from a player who surrendered, which doesn't even say that here, would retain all their items and could be bought or got off the carousel again. This is a very bad bug when it happens. It's very rare. Unfortunately, we did actually end up seeing it in the NA qualifiers where Bert bought an Aatrox that came with a, what was it, Divine Spat, Blitz Grab, Gargoyle?
Something like that, yeah.
And that Blitzcrank grab ended up being the difference in cost socks the game. Thankfully, as always when one of these bugs happens, it's always like cross your fingers it doesn't have an impact on the score. And thankfully it didn't. Even if Sox had won that game, the scores would not have changed. But obviously we wanted to get this fix in so that it doesn't happen at probably the most important weekend possible. So thankfully that is fixed.
Yeah,
So
this is the ultimate high roll bug. You get
yeah.
3 items.
And to be honest, this is one of those things I want to talk about. Like, just because a bug happens does not mean it's easy to track down. Finding the exact cause where it had to do with surrendering and only happens if there's a trait item on there was definitely very difficult to track down. But thankfully, we were able to get that in.
Yeah,
So,
big shout out to the team. They put in a lot of extra time to find and figure out the
yeah.
problem for this and how to solve it. So
Yeah. All right, so there you go. There's the updated patch. And the thing to stress is we are not going to be patching before the qualifiers. So this is the patch. So if you're taking that, if you're one of those players that's trying to get to Worlds and taking it seriously, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday are going to be your best practice days, and nothing's going to change between now and then. So cool. All right, and again, shout out to everyone on the team, QA, engineers for being able to help us get this micro patch in, Static and Kent for making these changes. Because again, we do want to give you the best patch quality. 11.4 is in a good state, but not perfect, and this is us trying to nudge things into even more perfect. And again, this is what we'll basically be doing till the end of the set, is a lot of these just nudges, because it does feel like we're pretty close to as good as set 4.5 is going to get. So
yeah, just wanted to add that going forward, a lot of the patches might be a bit smaller, but the main target of the patches will be just making more things playable. Things that are kind of struggling right now and that you want to play, but you can't because you're losing a lot. We're going to try to make those things more and more playable, opening up the content.
cool. All right, that's going to do it from us. This is the update. Patch comes live on Wednesday the 3rd, local time, nice and early in the morning. Good luck to all the competitors who are competing this weekend, as well as all the other regions. Good luck getting to Worlds. It's going to be exciting. I personally can't wait for when we finally get to Worlds and we get to see all the different region play styles mash up. That's going to be fun. But yeah. All right. Until next time, take it easy.